Hey everybody, Wandering Pastor coming to you again a few days after the election in the United States in which President Donald Trump was re-elected, I guess, and won the popular vote and won votes from groups of people that were not predicted, and it was pretty interesting. Now there are people who are bothered by that for sure, and I understand that. And there are others who, of course, are celebrating that, and I understand that as well. But I wanted to come to you today, and I want to talk to a specific group of people, and that is Christians who voted for Donald Trump. Now, I realize there are Christians who voted for Kamala Harris or didn't vote at all, and I realize that there are non-Christians who voted for both candidates or didn't vote at all for a variety of reasons. Both other groups are certainly welcome to listen to this, and Christians in general, I hope, will get something out of it, no matter who the candidate would have been that won. But I specifically wanted to talk to those of you Christians, like myself, who voted for Donald Trump, and I realize there's a lot of reasons you did so. This is a very complex decision that you made. But I wanted to challenge you a little bit, challenge me a little bit, challenge us, because we have both an opportunity and a responsibility to live our faith out in specific ways that interact with our politics over the next few years. You know, a few years ago, I wrote a book called American Idols, and it really is just a brief look at some of the ways the American church has compromised and has taken on some standards that go along with this world. And one of the ways we've done that is by our patriotism and our politics. And back in the 80s, the American church formed something called the moral majority. And the idea behind the moral majority was that the people who formed it believed most of the people in America agree with us, and therefore if we could just put our votes together, specifically in the evangelical church, if we could put our votes together as a voting bloc, we would finally get the respect and the attention that we deserve, and we could then yield those votes for power. Well, that was, theologically, looking back on that, I believe that was a problem because the American church compromised and really developed a sense of idolatry. Now, what do I mean by idolatry? Well, let me just read for you from Jeremiah chapter 2, beginning of verse 11. It says, "Has a nation ever changed its gods, and yet they are no gods at all? But my people have exchanged their glory for worthless idols." Verse 13, "My people have committed two sins. They have forsaken me, their spring of living water, and have dug their own cisterns, broken cisterns that cannot hold water." In other words, we've rejected God and the power of God, and in totally depending on Him and taking His priority, and instead have adopted an idol, a conduit to power that doesn't actually work. And it shouldn't work. And God doesn't want it to work because it's an idol. And at times, we are guilty in the American church of worshiping politics as our means to power, as our means to influence, as our means to control, instead of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that's what I mean by we have made politics an idol. And here's how that shows up in today's day and age. We elect somebody, whether it's president or governor or congresspeople or senator, or we get Supreme Court justices, and we kind of sit back and say, therefore, America will be great again, or America is in good shape again, or I don't have to do anything because we got the right people in power. And that's the wrong answer. If you're part of the body of Christ, we have a primary responsibility to continue to live that out and to make a difference in the lives of the people in our nation and in our neighborhoods and in our workplaces by how we live. We can't put politicians and politics up on a pedestal. We can't do it. They are all far from perfect. And certainly both cases, and I realize the press and everything has made a big stink out of how Donald Trump was far from perfect. And he's all these names that they called him, and he's going to do all these terrible things. And depending on the press you listen to, the other press said Kamala Harris was the same way. It was a different set of circumstances or set of accusations, but she was terrible too. And so we have both two seriously flawed people that we had to choose from. And I realize you did your best, and you tried to vote your conscience, and you chose to vote for Donald Trump, as I did. But that doesn't mean that we can just sit back. And it doesn't mean that we just trust in President Trump or trust in his cabinet to always do the right thing more than we trust in God. We can't. Now, you might think I'm overreacting, but I really don't think we are. So what do we need to do as Christians who voted for Trump? The first thing we need to do is pray for him, okay? I'm just saying pray for, and we would do this no matter who was in office, pray for that person. I believe we need to pray for his safety first and foremost, because clearly he's not, there are many people who feel very strongly negatively against him. And we've obviously seen attempts on his life already, so pray for his safety. But really, as Christians, we need to pray for his humility before the Lord. Now, he is kind of a braggadocious, brash, arrogant person. And maybe in some ways he needed to be in order to stand against the onslaught that came against him. But the truth is, if he's not walking with God, if he's not a born-again believer, if he's not seeing himself the way God sees him, then he's in spiritual danger, and he could, as a result of that, go off the rails in some way. So we need to be praying for him that he personally, just personally, as an individual, would humble himself before God, seek his face, turn from his own wickedness, seek the Lord, those kinds of things. And that we would see the fruit of that in his behavior for sure. And that also gets to the responsibility that we have accountability ourselves. We voted for this man because we believe he will do good things. We believe his policies will be better than Kamala Harris's. That's why we voted for him, right? Well, if that is true, if he starts or his cabinet starts to promote something or propose something that we don't believe is biblical, we don't believe is right, then we have a responsibility to stand up and say no. And here's why we think this is wrong. In particular about biblical things. Now, I realize there are going to be policies that no matter which politician, there will be policies, no matter how much you supported them, that you'll disagree with them on. And that's different. I'm not talking about that. But I'm talking about if he gets off the rails a little bit and starts to promote something that is against the Word of God or against the constitutional foundational principles, then we have to have the integrity and the boldness to stand up and say so, right? We have to go against that. We have to speak up. We need to live as children of light. And that's part of what that means. Let me just read to you from Ephesians chapter 5. It's a fairly lengthy section, but just listen to its import for the culture today. He's talking, of course, to Christians. Paul says, "Be imitators of God, therefore, as dearly loved children, and live a life of love, just as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us as a fragrant offering and a sacrifice to God." Christians, we need to live a life of love in this culture right now. The culture might think you Christians who voted for Trump are evil people. Okay, let them think what they will. We need to live differently. Continues. "But among you there must not even be a hint of sexual immorality or sexual immorality or any kind of impurity or greed, because these things are improper for God's holy people. Nor should there be any obscenity or foolish talk or coarse joking, which are out of place, rather thanksgiving." Listen, how you post online, the things you say about politics and about others, people on the other side, that is out of bounds. We should not live like that. "For this you can be sure, no immoral, impure, or greedy person, such a man as an idolater, has any inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and of God. Let no one deceive you with empty words, because of such things God's wrath comes on those who are disobedient. Therefore do not be partners with them." Verse 8, "For you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Live as children of light. For the fruit of all light consists of goodness, righteousness, and truth, and find out what pleases the Lord. Have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them." Many of us have been trying to do that, but let's do it in love. "For it's shameful even to mention what the disobedient do in secret, but everything exposed by the light becomes visible, for it is light that makes everything visible. That is why it is said, 'Wake up, O sleeper, rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you.' Be very careful then, believer, how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil. Therefore do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is." You and I are called, again, as children of God, as citizens of heaven, we are called to live differently. And in this day and age, we are called to do it that much more clearly, okay? It's an important thing that we do. We need to use this time to love God and to love others, to serve God and to serve others. We need to be people who are shining the light in the midst of a dark world. The fact that President Trump, that you voted for and I voted for, won, doesn't automatically make the world light. It doesn't. It's not a spiritual thing. That was a political thing. The spiritual stuff happens when we get the gospel out there, when we live it out, when we share it in testimony with other people. And that's why Jesus said, when he was asked, what is the greatest commandment? He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All of the law and all of the prophets hang on these two commandments. That's Matthew 22, 36 through 40. So listen, as a believer in Jesus Christ, there are going to be people who disagree with you how you voted. That's okay. Let them do so. You and I need to live this out. And that, among other things, means certainly pray for our president and the whole cabinet and all of the politicians, all of the leaders down through the different locales and stuff like that. Certainly pray for them, hold them accountable, especially when it comes to biblical principles. You know, if your guy compromises, if our guy compromises on biblical principles for expediency, we need to have the integrity to call that out. All right? And also live as children of light no matter what people accuse you of. Don't let their opinions change how you are supposed to live. You and I, don't get off track. You and I live as children of light, loving God with everything we've got and loving our neighbor as ourselves. And if we do that, I don't know what will happen in the politics and whatnot of the future, but I do know that God will be glorified and he will be pleased with us as we do so. And then if people accuse us of wrongdoing, so be it. Let them accuse us. But we know then we're living as children of light. Wandering Pastor saying peace. Think about it. Pray about it. Let's do this, okay? Have a great day.